Hello, welcome back to the Instech podcast. Zoya podcast producer here. This week, we're joined by Nigel Walsh, a good friend of Instech's, as well as being a known figure in InsurTech, who has just taken on an exciting new role at ServiceNow. If you haven't heard of ServiceNow before, you're not alone. But with 500 insurance companies already using their platform and a market cap approaching 200 billion US dollars, they're a major force in the streamlining workflows across the industry. Nigel sits down with Matthew to discuss his vision for making insurance lovable, the rise of agentic AI and digital workers, and how automation is reshaping claims, underwriting, and customer experiences. They also dive into the impact of AI on venture capital, the messy middle of legacy insurance systems, and the challenges of thought leadership in a noisy LinkedIn world. Let's dive into the conversation.
Nigel, I've tracked you down into your new job. And normally I ask people what's top of mind for them just now, but I'm very much hope for you. It's like, how do I make a success of my new job as you're 10 days in with a company I've got to confess, I hadn't heard the name of until you told me where you're going. But congratulations on the new role.
Thank you, first and foremost. It is genuinely day 10. I am buzzing with excitement and energy, but I'm going through what you do when you start a new organization in terms of meeting the global teams, getting up to speed properly on what we do, and then building out the plan for how we go make insurance lovable. You know, my mission still stands. Your comment about not knowing them is really intriguing to me. And part of the reason I'm here, we have a phenomenal reputation and, dare I say, probably in the region of 500 insurance companies that use us today, but in areas that you wouldn't normally associate with, be it underwriting or claims and so much more. So we have a really, really solid foundation to build upon for what ServiceNow does really, really well, which was help the world work smarter and better.
We're going to give anybody listening a chance to have a guess as to what the capitalization is of the company. So we're not going to give the answer, we'll come to it in a few minutes, but just to give people a chance to think. How big is ServiceNow? I'd never heard of them. I've got a theory about that, which is they've been so busy just working with clients, maybe they just don't need marketing. Extraordinarily large company. I guess they've done very well so far. Why do they need Nigel Walsh to join them now?
Traditionally, people will see ServiceNow as a IT service management application. So, you've got a ticket you want to raise in IT and it moves around the business to get solved and sorted out in many different ways. So the world of IT asset management and IT service management is our pedigree and our history. But over the last couple of years, they've moved into the areas of customer workflows, CRM and stuff like that. Employee workflow. So the onboarding that I'm going through now, or you're bringing together two organizations through M&A, how do we make sure that everyone has access to the right sort of things and goes through the process in the right way? Governance, risk and compliance. These are all workflows that organizations need to understand, orchestrate and govern correctly. Jensen Huang from NVIDIA describes ServiceNow as the AI operating system for the enterprise. So if you just think about that for a minute, all these things and all these systems that go on, whether they're claims or they're front office or whatever they might be, how do they all link together to make life much easier and more efficient for, in our world, carriers, brokers or others? That's the one that kind of got me hooked. And then you add into that things like data, Gen AI, as you'd expect, and agents. We talk about agents a lot. I felt it was a really, really strong mix of all the ingredients that we need to go solve some of the challenges of what I refer to as the messy middle inside organizations. We know they've been riddled with legacy for years. Was there a way to turn that into a bit more of a smarter, more efficient setup for insurers? Then that's why I'm here.
Messy middle, or as Robin Mertens might say, perhaps with the risk of offending you and your colleagues, boring but brilliant. You said 500 companies. You've mentioned NVIDIA in there. Put people out of their misery. How big is, so what's the capitalization of ServiceNow?
I think probably as of today, we're probably just shy of 200 billion market cap. So it's an enormous organization that thousands of organizations rely on to move work around in their organizations. Forrester came out a few months back and positioned us as a leader in the way for claims management. So when you say, what does Nigel Walsh want to do? I'm building on the great foundation that the teams here at ServiceNow have got today, and then they're going to run fast into the world of insurance globally.
We've got a lot to cover, but there are definitely things that I know you're pretty passionate about. There's a couple that I'm discovering and learning about rapidly. Agentic AI and agents, definitely want to talk about that. The AI's role in claims and customer engagement came up. There's quite an interesting thing around reading in the New York Times yesterday about the impact of AI on VC and funding. I thought it'd be quite interesting to talk about. And then you've got an interesting post about LinkedIn dilemma, insurance thought leadership in a noisy world. What else did we cover just to make sure we don't miss it in the next, what have we got left, 20 minutes?
The cycle of news is going so fast right now. It's hard to stay abridged and on top of all these things, which is actually why I put the newsletter together, because actually it was just so many things. It's trying to work out how we start to join the dots.
How's that going, by the way? Because you're on episode 11.
Honestly, it's been lovely. I kept getting asked for people to say, hey, where'd you get your news from? Or how did you find this or whatever else? So I decided just to write it all into one place. And I'm not necessarily writing for other people. I'm writing for myself, because if I write these things down, it's my way of starting to organize my thoughts about how this matters in my world and stuff going forward. I start writing mine almost immediately by just capturing links of things that I'm interested in. And then as I listen or as I read them or whatever else, I add them into a document or into something else. And then by the Sunday morning, I've got a massive long list I have to trim down because it's just too much, a huge long mess. And I think AI is really good at helping you synthesize some of those things.
Yeah. So picking up on that, I want to just come back and just talk about this article in the New York Times. So fascinating discussion around how AI is impacting VC. And what it's basically saying is that so in the past, a lot of companies when they start up would raise a lot of funds from VC, hire lots of people. And what's happening now, a lot of companies are actually realizing they need to, and there's benefits of capping out between 20 and 100 people. And because this gets more complicated to build a business after that. I don't know if you've read that or you've probably come across this concept about, it's a big shift now because people don't need so much money from VC. And as the people who can use the AI most effectively are going to race ahead without, it's a different dynamic about hiring people. I don't know if you've seen that. What's your reaction to that?
I'm semi in agreement with it. And I say semi because I think lots of these roles and tasks will have disappeared or gone away because we can be more effective and efficient, as you say. Maybe it's not going to happen today or tomorrow, but maybe it happens in the future. And then, of course, the flip side to that is there's no way you can get to that because actually running a business is really, really hard. There's these great things out there that people could say might happen, but the reality of it is you still need people to do all the things that are the drudgery, dare I say, of running a business, no matter how big or how small it might be. I still am a big fan of the augment rather than replace, although there are lots of things that AI right now is happily replacing, be it directly or through agents or a series of agents all joining together to do tasks that are just non-value add, really.
Let's talk about agents and agentic AI. I mean, I had a fascinating discussion with Robin Robinson, who been through various different careers, built WeGoLook, fascinating business. Will be coming out on the podcast this weekend as we record, which is the 28th of February. But you've been a big enthusiast for this, but just for people that may not quite understand what's happening with agents and agentic AI, can you give the Nigel Walsh sort of simple version of what they're actually doing and why they're different from what we've got to know with ChatGPT and generative AI in the last couple of years?
Yeah, the simple answer for me is in the world of LLMs, we typically started out, is it 2 years ago now or thereabouts? And we went to an LLM to do a task and come back. But you and I, or everyone else out there, was the individual then deciding what that next step might be. So they're almost single-threaded to some extent, step by step by step. You put something in, get something back, put something in, get something back. It just wasn't a Google search, or other search engines might still exist. I'm still biased to Google. My friends there, as I see you smiling. In the world of agentic and agents, now you've got agents that can take the response from the thing you put in and then decide what to do with it and then to go and do something else. So actually, one of the phrases I used recently in a session before I joined ServiceNow was we might go from a world where we had human in the loop to agent in the loop, or it might be agent to agent to agent to human. And I say human at the end still because we still have to admit we're in a regulated environment and we may not be comfortable with having these things do everything. But actually, there are now thousands of, an organization in my mind is going to have thousands of agents doing multiple different tasks around the organization, you'll need a platform of sorts to then orchestrate these agents, string them all together, and you go from a linear process to go input, output, input, output, input, output, like we did early on, into almost a non-linear process that could say, I get information about this claim or this underwriting case in multiple different phases, not always in the right order. Imagine if we could process that in the way in which it came in and string it together in a different way and reason at the same time and so much more. So I think the key difference for me is you've gone from point to point to point to multi-point, and then the fact you've still got the human at the end if you want to be able to go, actually, and I can now take all these things that have done this work for me and process it as I see fit.
And from a personal point of view, you're an early adopter of new technology. Most people got used to just going into ChatGPT, trying something out. Is there a kind of consumer free version where we can go out and just experience what it's like to start using agents?
There's a whole load out there. They might do loads of task queue. I've actually seen more and more directories of agents spring up where you can actually go, I want a lead generation. If I'm in the world of the business, I've got a lead generation agent, I've got a customer agent, and so much more. There's actually directories of agents that already exist. And our next task will be they go, well, actually, how do we categorize them and then work out which ones are useful to us or not? I'm like you, probably. I'm still using ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude and a bunch of others. But again, each and every one of those platforms. So ChatGPT brought out their agent space or their agent capability. Google's got agent space. And there's a whole host of these things where they're stringing together lots of capabilities at each of the core technology firms.
As you think about it there, you can see the winners are going to be the people where you have your trusted orchestration layer agents that's kind of managing all the other agents.
I think you might have just hit on one of the reasons that I'm at ServiceNow is the ability to orchestrate thousands of agents that sit out there doing stuff day in, day out. ChatGPT is just called Operator. So, and again, the example they gave on launch day, probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, was you're booking travel. Travel booking seems to be like the personal consumer choice of examples for most companies. So imagine going to go and grab the hotel, grab the flight, look at times, look at connections, all through one thing, rather than you doing all those things individually.
Well, I'll just give you my little success story last weekend, because like you, I ended up making quite a few introductions. I thought, right, okay, there must be a way to go through all my Gmail, get all the people I've sent an email to, they practically all have introductions or introducing in it, roll them together, create a Google Sheet that summarized all the introductions. And it was pretty extraordinary, just through ChatGPT and then Gmail and then Google Script. In about 2 hours of playing around, I got a summary of all the emails I'd sent in a way I could actually read them, because it wasn't like 600 emails. It was the ones that actually had introductions in them. And actually, without really understanding, I understood the process of the tech I was using, and I trusted the result. But it was just fascinating, a little bit about this discussion about what you can do, and now you can do it in a couple of hours in a weekend.
It's interesting. One of the things that I'm in this weekend's newsletter that I picked up earlier this week was an article from Kevin Roos in the New York Times talking about vibe coding. And vibe coding is basically him sitting there saying, I'm not a programmer, I'm not a coder. I've been working with a bunch of tools out there that have gone out there and helped me build applications as a non-coder and brought together both the design, the logic, the user experience, the whole lot. And one of them is like helping him create meals for his son's lunchbox each day. So this really, that'll be in this week's. The other example that I gave was for, and again, you might have seen this one before as well, was the AI hedge fund. So again, from zero, there's a guy on Twitter that posted how agents would string things together in the world of hedge funds. So he built 6 agents, right? A market data agent, a quant agent, fundamentals agent, a sentiment agent, risk manager, and a portfolio manager. And in his tweet, not only has he said, here's how it's built together, he's also then published it onto GitHub to say, I've open sourced all the code. So again, this got a load of news a while back to say, a non-coder, he was very clear to go, I had no prior coding experience before, could leverage tools that exist on the market, like you've done for the summary, to actually construct each of these individual things that had a specific task. Go and get me detail, go and get me market information, go and get me third-party data, and then join it all together in a really, really simple way. Now, you and I as consumers, that's quite interesting and quite geeky, and that's what I guess you and I get up to in our spare time. As an enterprise, you just got to put the right controls and governance all around those things. So I think we're going to see a load of that this year, without a shadow of a doubt.
And your point about coding is interesting because, yes, you don't need to code, but there's still a discipline and a logic about just what you've described, what I described, you'll be familiar with this term pseudocode, which is if you're writing code, you actually write the code you're going to write in a sort of simple, almost like conversational language. If you try and do what you just described without some logic and you just get tied up in knots. I mean, you can sort of throw spaghetti at the wall and hope it sticks and you've solved it. But really, the most effective if you think about logic. So I think it's a really interesting transition. It's a bit like learning Latin to be able to understand English. Or speak languages. If you understand the sort of the discipline, the framework, you're then much more effective, even if you don't have to sit down and write out lines of Python code. If you just try and do it by throwing things around, you might be successful, but you're not too sure why you're successful, and you can't retrace what you did, and it gets a bit frustrating after a while.
I tell my kids and others, we need to be curious, creative, and have the ability to tell a story. That curiosity when it comes to understanding some of these AI tools, and there are just so many now, and how they all string together. But I think the same is true for this. If you understand how to build an agent and then how those agents then connect to each other and the logic, all work backwards from the outcome that you want, you've actually got some really cool things that we can do going forward. But it all comes back to, hey, don't ever stop being curious about what the art of that possible could be.
So I've framed a bunch of the questions. Your turn now. What's on your mind?
One thing that's on the back of my mind, and I'd love your view as well, given what you've got coming up with exponential risk, is the wildfires in California were horrific and probably one of the most impactful events that we saw world over. They seem to have gone very quiet, very quickly as insurers have entered results season. And lo and behold, results from the carriers that have already released have been stellar, whether it's Chubb in the USA or Aviva here and in Canada and a bunch of others. Insurers continue to do really, really well. So I guess there's two questions there. One is, what's going on in the world of Nat Cat and how have California left the world or the insurance world positioned for 25, 26 and 27 going forward? And two, does it matter given the results that we continue to push out there that continue to be exceptional, which has been a long-standing thing on my mind.
Yeah, and gets quite contentious as well, because one of the challenges the regulators are pushing back on insurers for using models to assess risks to pass the price on to the consumer, where you've got variation, whether it's due to population increase, climate conditions. Quite a sensitive topic, actually, if you're an insurer, if you're making money, but then you're also trying to claim you want to go and charge prices. I mean, the wildfires, so it's still a kind of lot of variation about what the total cost is. I've seen figures as high as 75 billion. It's nothing like that. But $30 billion, interestingly, is about the same price the Northridge earthquake would have been back in 94 in today's dollars. I actually happened to go out to the Northridge earthquake and saw it and got a context for it. Having said that, the settlement for the wildfires is pretty straightforward. It's sort of binary. You've got 16,700 properties that were destroyed. You've got some that have got smoke damage done to them. If you've got like a 6-month period to get your property going again, and your property surrounded, the whole neighborhood's gone. But a lot of them is total loss, so you get a payout. The big challenge, and it kind of comes back to this discussion about AI, and you mentioned for the Federato podcast we did, and all the great things they're doing with portfolio optimization. But what the industry still doesn't solve is actually how do you get good information about a property, where it is, what's it made of, and then what's the damage going to be when you've got a loss, and then what the rebuild cost is going to be. We all know garbage in, garbage out, but it doesn't matter how good your analytical tool is. If you don't have the sort of the true value of the true, not just the value, but the true definition of what the physical characteristics of a building are, then you're always going to have massive uncertainty in how you model it. And we can talk a bit about why that's so difficult to get, because in practice, it's not difficult. It's just a commercial challenge about how do you get that information at a cost that's acceptable to the insurers. So when I look at my perspective of having done this stuff forever, there's still a huge amount of uncertainty inherent in these analytics before you even start getting into the whole uncertainty about catastrophic events that happen very infrequently, and is it climate change or is it climate variability? But just the fundamental of what I'm actually insuring, where is it, and what's it going to perform is still it's still massive, and we're still some way from all the great things happening with generative AI and everything, of actually being able to get that information in a commercially acceptable way in the hands of insurers to use it.
I'm like you. I think the opportunity is still gargantuan. Our friends like Sarah Russell and others that have done some amazing stuff with Bellwether and Wildfire out of Google X will continue to excel, and insurers will leverage that more and more as they go forward to get that level of certainty. The flip side of that, and actually getting back to this session I did a few weeks back, the flip side to that, of course, is you've got to be able to use it efficiently or effectively. And what I mean by that is, if I look at one of the Senate bills in the US, SB 1120 was a new California law passed just recently that prohibits using AI as a basis to deny health insurance claims. And so it doesn't ban it entirely, but it does mandate that human judgment remains central to coverage decisions. So I think there's, you go back to some of these McKinsey reports that came out in their global report that says how you do business, not just the lines of where you play, is probably as important for insurers to continue to excel in terms of numbers and so much more going forward. So I think the point you make about data coming in around property, the insights you get whether you're using agents or so much more, are how you run your business and what you do to underwrite that risk. How you then apply it, I think you've got things like SB 1120 and others around the world that then may prohibit you using it on the external side. So I think you're going to see more and more insurers focused in and down for things that they are controllable. You heard Amanda on the Aviva call just yesterday, talking about how they're using generative AI in their organization in multiple different places. So it's not uncommon. The Sandra at Teachers Insurance in the US talked about a patent that they've just launched with her on the patent application, along with Swati Singh and Sastry. So there's some really cool things. And it's actually really inspiring to see leaders of these organizations talk about how technology is changing experiences, not just for consumers, but actually for their own employees as well.
Yeah, and I mean, we turn the challenge into an opportunity, which is in so many areas in life, people respond much more to a gain than trying to avoid a loss. So, where ultimately I think everybody benefits is if you can use the technology to show an insurer where they should be offering insurance because the homeowner or the company has provided protection, then everybody should win at that point, because you're incentivizing better behavior. People are prepared to use the data to go and give insurance that other people might not have given insurance for. And you've got a more motivated buyer because they know they can get coverage. In some cases, they couldn't get coverage at all by providing more information and maintaining it. So the bright, shiny light of hope is that the sort of, whether it's regulation, the industry, behavior, brokers, creates an incentive for better behavior, I suppose. That's probably not quite the right word. But incentives to reduce the exposure to risk, and therefore everyone benefits. And we, starting to see that for Visico, I know quite well, who do flood warning for surface water and have sensors. They're seeing companies now where they've got high vulnerability to flood, and big corporations use those sensors and that forecasting to take action before the water rises. And similarly with SafeHub, who are using sensors on buildings, and you've seen them. And Nigel, we try to stick one on the Google building. You can use that for understanding what damage might have been after an earthquake. So my point being, there's some real positives in here that people can benefit, that ultimately doesn't get into sort of redlining and exclusion, all things people don't like, understandably, which is why you get some of these challenges about why you need a human in the loop and all the rest of it. But it does need people to work in harmony to sort of support this and look for opportunities to go and do it. But I'm really kind of encouraged about that. I mean, there's $100 billion a year on average loss for catastrophes. The sort of market for analytics modeling is about $1 billion. There's a massive opportunity to sort of help the world to have less exposure to loss.
I couldn't agree more. I was commenting online actually to one of the regulars' comments about insurance innovation, and is it a big I or a little I? And it goes back to my point. I've said it many times. It's evolution and revolution. We always love talking about the big revolutionary things that we can do, but the reality is back to we're doing well, we're doing the right things. You look at the big carriers, be it regional or global, and we're doing really well. And actually, evolution suits our market and our risk appetite probably better than revolutionary steps that we're probably not going to make anytime soon.
Well, on that topic, Nigel, it's recording at the end of February. So a little bit late for your predictions. They might be out there somewhere. I didn't manage to get hold of them before this call. So you've got a couple of months into the year. I'm going to give you one prediction for this year on that topic. And you are an enthusiast. So tell us just what do you see happening in 2025 that will be markedly different when we score your homework? That has to be demonstrably different by the end of the year than it is now.
Look, I am upbeat about agents. And I know it's a technology thing, and I know it's been talked about quite a lot. Sam Altman of OpenAI, in his reflections letter last year, did make the prediction that digital workers will be in the workforce by the end of the year. And it was kind of a shock to everyone. I can genuinely see it happening. I'm not saying there's going to be a robot sitting next to you, but imagine having a series of agents, both in your personal life and in your work life, that did the non-value add tasks, orchestrated by a platform that meant you could sit there and go be way more effective and efficient at your job and spend more time with customers. And the reason I say that is you've probably seen it as well. There's it's a UK publication about consumer demands and everything else, report and survey or petition against insurance companies. And last time I checked, it had about 120,000 people complaining about insurance. So I think we've still got a load of work to do to change the perception for insurance companies. And I think by leveraging things like agents in our organizations, we can be much smarter and much better going forward.
Yeah, we'll move on from that one, given some of my recent claims experience. But
you didn't sign it as well, did you?
Well, I would have done if someone had sent it to me. Anyway, move on from that. LinkedIn dilemma: insurance thought leadership in a noisy world. It says here, from care of my ChatGPT, Nigel raised the issue of why some well-written LinkedIn posts flop while off-the-cuff posts go viral. Tell me a bit more about that. What's going on with LinkedIn, or what's frustrating you?
You and I have talked about this forever, I think, and actually all my friends that write, whether it's Rory or Denise or others, there's so many people that put really good things out there. I think we've all been in the same boat, and it goes back to our very opening comment about who are you writing for and does it matter? I write for me and to build my thoughts and help me get my head around things. But there are times, and again, Dan Murray-Serter, who you know as well, talks about how he posted a picture of work being your family just in passing as a bit of a joke. And I think he said he got like 1.2 million impressions on LinkedIn, which is a huge number of impressions versus something that might be well written, thought through, researched, published, and gets nothing. So I don't think, because I'm not doing it as my day job or whatever else, it's very hard sometimes to judge what will work and what won't work and how you can work with the, dare I say, algorithm of what's going on at any one point in time. So I've been through the same. I'm sure you've done the same thing where you've spent hours or days writing something for it just to be completely missed and surfaced a week or two later to 3 people versus an off-the-cuff comment about woodworking or something else that appeals to you and getting loads of engagement.
Yeah, not so much in woodworking. And I was going to ask you if Dan's post managed to get as many as your post when you announced you're leaving Google, because that must have been close to lots of zeros on the engagement for that when I last looked at it.
I was very flattered both by the, hey, thank you for a phenomenal 4 years, Google, and welcome to ServiceNow. The reaction from my friends and colleagues across the market has been extraordinary, and I'm genuinely humbled by it. It was overwhelming, to say the least.
Back on this LinkedIn one then, I mean, I've got a little bit jaded with it because we sort of lose control a bit, don't we? I mean, you've obviously figured out how to work the algorithm, but do you think is there a room for another? What's the next LinkedIn? I mean, these social media tends to go through a 5-8 year cycle. The young kind of move on a little bit. Maybe we just get stuck in one place. But do you see anything else emerging that's going to be slightly different from LinkedIn, but it's going to be the go-to place?
I've not. I really haven't. And people try to do Substacks and they try to do other types of blogs. It's a 20-year journey. We've invested so much into it so far. And the backlash against X and whatever else, things like Threads started out, and I think it's done well on an imagery or fitness, or at least my observation. People talked about Blue Sky, but there's only so much that you can handle. And, I was chatting to one of the other guys recently that came off of X or Twitter years ago because it was a time suck. So I think you just got to work out where you spend your amount of time. I love LinkedIn because everyone seems to be there. It's the right conversation. I remember speaking to one of the co-founders of CMT in the US, Harry Balakrishnan, and Harry posted something that got a load of pushback and negative reaction. Harry talked about, well, you should let kids be kids and don't let them set up a LinkedIn account too young. Whereas if you're at school, bear it, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, they're actually actively encouraging you to build your profile from a very, very early age. And that was a really interesting article. It was probably about 7 or 8 months ago. I'm in the camp of build your profile, start to, be an expert at something and listen and tune in. I think the best advice I ever had from Scott Wheatley at Deloitte when I joined Deloitte years ago was be part of the community, don't just serve it. And I think that's what LinkedIn or Twitter back in the day did a really, really good job of. I've not seen anything else since that's come along to create such a sense of community. Just got to work out how to make the feeds and the algorithms work for you.
Yeah, but I think my second most successful one is when I had a photograph of my hotel bedroom surrounded by cushions doing a podcast recording, and all the ones that seem to be like photographs that are just a little bit offbeat. So I've given up writing stuff now. I'm just going to do wacky photographs.
But you should. But even your post the other day. See, I do look at them. Even your post the other day of a delivery driver with what looked like 1,000 parking tickets in his windscreen. I laughed at and I liked and whatever else because I thought it was quite funny. It's what you see. It just was a complete disregard for parking anywhere. Give me another ticket.
I almost got thumped for that. It was actually, there's two of them, actually. There's two vans from Openreach, the British Telecom, I think, spin-off. And they had all these parking tickets in them. And I took a photograph of one and I walked past the van and the window came down. This bloke said, "Oi, mate, what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I was just really admiring your parking tickets." And I got away with not being thumped. But, live life. You live life vicariously at Instack. Well, look, Nigel, I've taken up a lot of your time. It's been great to catch up. Anything people should remember about ServiceNow or Nigel Walsh to leave them with? What's the one thing you want to leave ringing in people's ears?
I'm genuinely excited about the amazing foundation I've turned up to, the team have built with, as I said, hundreds of carriers using us already. But we are way more than what our pedigree of IT service management is, and the stuff we're doing around customer workflows, employee workflows, and importantly, insurance workflows, whether it's underwriting or claims or so much more. And there'll be a load more stuff coming out in our annual event in May in Las Vegas, where we've got, I think, 10 or 12 insurance companies on stage talking about what they're up to. So I'll certainly come back and share more, or I may even get you out there, Matthew, to come see us. So who knows?
Very brilliant. Well, I mean, normally I ask people how do they contact you or ServiceNow, but Nigel Walsh, LinkedIn, I'm sure you'll be able to help them learn more about what's going on. You've been a great help for us, great friend in your previous career, and thank you for all the support with that, Nigel. That sort of long tail to that of benefits. So yeah, as you know, very happy to help you, support you going forward, and love to do more with you. Because at some point, people do need to start to know about who ServiceNow is, just because if you're working there, you kind of don't want to have to explain to your mother-in-law or something, or your wife or your partner about what your job is. So, nothing else, get the marketing out.
I 100% hear you, and I'm looking forward to doing lots more together. The one mega benefit of working at Google is everyone on the planet has heard of them. I've been married or been together with Emma for 25 years this year. She still has no idea what I do. So, I mean, however many times I explain it or whatever else, what can I say to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, money comes in, so I suppose it's fine. And I'm sure also Emma's delighted you're not spending half your life in the US as well. So I'm sure knowing you're a family man, I'm sure that's a big bonus as well, being able to spend some time with the family.
Really, really great to be home.
Well, Nigel, on a happy note, I will let you go and see you in the flesh before too long, I know.
Thank you very much. See you next week.
Well, if you've made it this far, then I'm pretty sure you found that as interesting as I did. The Instech podcast comes out every Sunday morning, where we spotlight the latest news, leading voices, and freshest updates across insurance that you need to know about. If you would like to take part in these conversations, head to www.instech.co to find out how you can join our network and be a part of the insurance intelligence for the curious.